I want to welcome those just joining us. And for those of you who are here with us live, welcome. We are going to go ahead and dive in. Thanks for signing on to today's webinar, From Issuance to Impact, a blueprint for usable and trusted credentials. Today, we're going to explore how we can design and issue credentials that are utilized by learners to advance in their careers and trusted by employers. Before I turn the mic over to our speaker today, I'd like to share a couple of very brief housekeeping notes. We are going to have some time for Q&A after the presentation today. So if you have a question for Erica, please submit it using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. Also, this session is being recorded and will be sent to each of you to be viewed and shared on demand via email before the end of this week. So with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Erica Longenbach. She is an enterprise account executive here at Accredible and has worked very closely with a number of the top programs that we're going to highlight in today's conversation on issuing digital credentials at scale that employers recognize, trust, and value. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Erica.
Great. Thanks so much, Laura. Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Longenbach, and like Laura said, I am an enterprise account executive here at Accredible. So we're here today because most of us in this room have already done the hard part. We've launched a credentialing program. You've issued the badges, you're recognizing learning, and you've got all your systems in place. But today I want to challenge us to ask some harder questions. Are these credentials working? And are they opening doors for learners? Finally, are they being trusted and used by employers? Because for too many programs, the credential gets issued and then it disappears. It doesn't get shared, it doesn't get seen, and it doesn't ultimately lead to anything. So today's session is not about issuing more. It's about designing credentials that actually perform, that are usable, discoverable, and trusted. And to show why that matters, let me paint you a scenario. So imagine being handed a beautifully designed boarding pass. It looks official. It has your name, your destination, and a flight number. But when you get to the airport, the airline can't scan it. The gate agent doesn't recognize it, and you're not sure which terminal to go to. Technically, you hold proof that you belong on a flight, but in practice, you're stuck. Uh, that's what happens when we issue digital credentials that aren't designed to be usable. They're not just earned, but understood, trusted, and acted upon. So most programs have solved credential issuance, but they haven't solved the credential usability and trust question, whether the credential gets recognized, opened, and acted upon in the moments that matter the most. So why does this happen? How can something that looks legitimate, even well-designed, fail at the moment it matters most? Let's take a look at what the data tells us. In our state of credentialing research throughout 2024 and 2025, we surveyed 100,000 learners and more than 200 credential issuers, and over 500 HR and recruiting leaders. When looking at both employees and learners, what they want from a credential is surprisingly aligned. They want clarity, a clear summary of what the learner actually learned. They want evidence, something to show how that learning was assessed. They want visibility, to find credentials and candidates, not just to receive them. And they want trust signals like third-party endorsements. But here's the problem. Most issuers aren't delivering on many of these items. Only 30% are including detailed metadata in their credentials. Only 43% are surfacing how the skill was assessed. Only 37% offer a public directory, and only 21% include endorsements, even though 94% of employers say they're essential or valuable. This is what we mean when we say credentials are being designed with invisibility, not intentionally, but by default. So even when the learner and employers are aligned on what they need, the credential still actually falls short. Not because we don't care, but because too many programs stop at issuance and never look at what happens next. And here's the real problem. Most of us aren't even measuring it. Yeah, this is the real problem underneath all the others. We can't fix what we're not measuring. And right now, Only 33% of issuers have a structured process to track and formally understand what happens after the credential is issued. Is it shared? Is it viewed? Is it acted on? Does it help the learner? We don't know because most teams never really follow this trail. And that's how we end up with credentials that feel polished but don't perform. They're invisible, they're unverified, and they're unmeasured. And learners are the ones that get caught in the middle. This is what the usability gap feels like from the learner side. Laura Retigui earned a micro-credential through a series of graduate-level courses, but she didn't even realize she had earned it until after the fact. At one EdTech Summit, she shared, I got the credential without realizing I was even earning it. Instead, I received it through the process of earning my master's degree because I finished a series of courses aligned with specific skills, and that earned me the micro-credential. Once I learned about it, claimed it, and opened it, I thought, wow, this is important, and I want to get more. That moment, the wow, this is important moment, is what we should be designing for. But it can't happen if learners don't know what the credential is, what it means, or how to use it. Invisibility is not neutral, it's a lost opportunity. So, what makes a credential usable to learners and employers alike? And let's look at what that actually means. So far, we've talked about credentials that don't get shared, don't get trusted, and don't get used. But that doesn't start at the moment of issuance. The root of many of these issues is inconsistency at the design level. And that's because half of credentialing programs lack any form of formal structure. According to our 2025 survey, just 54% of issuers have a credential framework in place. That means for nearly half of all programs, there's no shared definition of what a badge means, what goes into it, how it looks, or how it fits into a larger system. And the result is that what you see on the left, which is a credential sprawl. Learners don't understand the difference between badges, employers can't compare or interpret them, and internally, every team is reinventing the wheel. But structure changes everything. With a strong framework, you don't just clean up the badge library, you start building a system that can scale. So let's look at what a strong credential framework actually does and why it matters. So what does structure actually unlock? A strong credential framework gives you more than just consistency. It gives you credibility, clarity, and control. It's how you make sure every badge communicates its level and meaning clearly, including the right metadata and how it fits into your larger system of learning. This isn't a theory. Syracuse University has done this at scale, defining badge categories, tiered visuals, and standardizing components across all types of programs. That means learners always know where they are in their journey. Employers know what that badge represents, and internal teams can expand without starting from scratch each time. Frameworks aren't just about quality control. They're really for building systems that work for everyone. And when programs adopt this kind of structure, the results speak for themselves. Let's just look at junior achievement, Syracuse, and the Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois. Right. So let's look at what happens when programs invest in clear frameworks, governance, and a system of design. Junior Achievement USA built a centralized framework used by over 100 affiliates across the country. They aligned badge categories, design, and issuance rules, and as a result, achieved an 80% engagement rate and a 52% share rate on LinkedIn. Syracuse University implemented a framework, a badging council, and even a 24-page governance guide to ensure cross-campus consistency. It covered badge naming, tiers, metadata, and design standards, helping scale their digital credentials across diverse academic units without using badge sprawl or confusion. The Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois scaled to over 42,000 credentials using a structured internal approval process that balanced speed with quality. Today, 62% of learners earn multiple credentials with an average of 3 or more per learner, and they see an 80% plus engagement rate and a 78% plus LinkedIn share rate. These aren't one-off wins. These programs show that structure creates clarity and clarity fuels adoption, sharing, and trust. So now that we've seen the results of a great design and governance scheme, let's look at what's usable, valuable credentials actually look like and what the best programs are doing differently. So when we talk about credential usability, we don't mean just whether the badge looks good or if it's getting issued automatically. We mean, can the learner explain it? Can they share it in useful places? Can an employer find it, verify it, and recognize its value without jumping through hoops? These are 5 key traits that determine whether a credential performs well in the real world. Let's walk through each one, looking at what the best programs are doing to bring each of these things to life. So we'll start with the most foundational trait, explainability. If no one can tell what the credential means, it won't matter where it's shared or who's seen it. So, explainability. When someone opens a credential, whether it's an employer, an admissions officer, or even a learner themselves, they should instantly understand what that represents. What was learned, what was required, and why does it matter? Without clarity, a credential becomes just another icon on a LinkedIn profile. It's not a signal of a real skill or achievement. Let's look at what makes a credential explainable and the most common breakdowns that prevent it. And let's be clear, employers already value digital credentials. In our 2025 survey, 97% said they either are an essential or a nice to have, on par with portfolios and reference letters, and more useful than resumes alone. But that value depends on trust. And employers told us exactly when that trust breaks down: vague skills, missing evidence, inflated claims, or an amateur design. These aren't fringe cases. They're common and they're completely avoidable. They all relate to metadata, structure, and design, not inherent flaws in the credentialing model. So let's take a look at what it looks like when a credentials are explainable. This example is from the Gies College of Business, and it shows exactly what it looks like when a credential is clear, credible, and self-explanatory. The credential includes a summary of what the learner completed, the skills they demonstrated, and the criteria used to assess them, all embedded right in the metadata. This isn't just good design, it's trust building. When an employer or admissions officer opens this credential, they don't have to guess. The meaning is immediately clear. What turns a badge into a signal is clarity. What did the learner complete? What did they demonstrate? Why does it matter and to whom? And who issued it, and does that look credible? The last one's important. You'll notice that the Gies brand is front and center here, not a credible, not just some platform branded badge. They are institutional credibility is doing the work. And we'll come back to that, why this matters, and talk through about that recognizability trait in just a moment. But even the most explainable credential doesn't matter if no one sees it. Let's talk about shareability and what happens after a credential is issued. So far, we've talked about how credentials communicate meaning. Now we shift to whether or not they're actually being used. Even in the best designed badge, it can lose power if it stays buried in someone's inbox or LMS. Shareability means learners can bring their achievements into real world contexts, applications, interviews, LinkedIn, and portfolios. Let's look at what it takes to design for that kind of visibility and portability. Designing for usability isn't just what about the credential it says, but it's about what the learners can do with it. So even the most beautifully designed badge loses its power if it stays hidden. That's why leading programs make sharing seamless. They include pre-written LinkedIn captions, digital credential transcripts are structured, portable records that unify badges, certificates, and micro-credentials into a shareable learner snapshot, enabling digital resumes that help credentials show up in the hiring process, not just a badge inbox. And friction is the enemy. We've seen that requiring a login or account creation can reduce credential sharing by up to 75%. If you want your credentials to travel, they have to be accessible and easy to share. But what about when learners aren't the ones sharing? What about when an employer is searching? That's where discoverability comes in. So far, we've discussed on how credentials communicate meaning and how learners share them. But what happens when an employer is the one searching? Discoverability is what allows credentials to work without needing to be manually handed off. It turns passive records into signals that can be found and acted upon. And while digital credentials are inherently more accessible than paper, discoverability isn't always automatic. It has to be intentionally designed, whether that's through learner sharing, indexed landing pages, search optimized metadata, or online directories. So let's look at how the best programs are making their credentials not just visible, but findable. Discoverability means your credentials show up when it counts, not just when the learner shares them, but when an employer is actively looking for qualified candidates. In our most recent survey, 84% of learners said that they wanted to be featured in a public directory to be connected with future opportunities. They want visibility, not just validation. And employers are leaning in. Nearly 3/4 said they have already either used or want directories of credentialed talent as part of their sourcing process. But directories don't just benefit learners, they deliver tangible value to issuers as well. When learners know their credentials are discoverable, engagement increases. And when employers see your program show up in their searches, it builds brand authority and demand. It signals that your credentials lead somewhere and that your brand is the one that stands behind them. That's the kind of visibility that creates real opportunity for your learners and for your institution. Of course, visibility alone isn't enough. Once a credential is found, the next question is, can I trust it? That's where verification comes in, where digital credentials have a huge advantage. Great. So we've talked about how credentials are explainable, shareable, and discoverable. But the real test, especially for employers, is, can I trust it? That's where digital credentials have a built-in advantage, verifiability. Unlike paper or PDFs, digital credentials are backed by evidence, issued by a known organization, and can be verified instantly. No calls, no guesswork. The trait is often overlooked because it feels like a technical detail, but it's actually a trust accelerator. Let's look at the data behind why verifiability matters and how to deliver on that promise. Here's why verification matters and why it needs to be frictionless. 72% of learners want credentials that are verifiable and fraud resistant, something PDFs or paper simply can't provide. 3 out of 4 employers say digital credentials make evaluation easier, and nearly all of them, 84%, have caught inflated or false claims on resumes. This is a default strength of the digital, but it only works if the credential is accessible, the issuer is clearly identified, and the proof is there at a glance. Once someone opens the credential, two things matter. Can they verify it? And do they trust what they see? We just covered verification. Now let's talk about recognizability. Verification tells you it's valid, but recognizability tells you it's credible, that it belongs to a trusted institution and stands for something real. This final trait is about branding, consistency, and endorsement, the things that build trust at a glance. Here's what it looks like in practice. This is what a recognizable looks like in practice. The brand on the credential matters. It should feel like it belongs to your institution, not a third-party platform. And design isn't just decoration, it signals structure, rigor, and professionalism at a glance. And then there's endorsement. According to our 2025 employer survey, 94% of employers say that third-party endorsements from an academic, employer, or industry body are either essential or nice to have in hiring decisions. Top trusted sources, academic institutions at 73%, employers at 63%, and industry associations at 55%. Together, branding, design, and endorsement build immediate trust before the hiring manager even reads a word. We've just talked through what makes a credentials usable and trusted today. So let's wrap up with an action plan. You've just seen the 5 traits that make a credential usable and trusted, and the programs that are putting these good practices into practice. This checklist ties it all together. It's not a list of platform features, it's a design blueprint built from what best teams are doing right now. Whether you're launching your first badge or scaling across departments, this is where to focus. But even the best blueprint doesn't matter if you don't act. And the only way to know it's working is to measure it. That's why we've created a guide and survey template to help you do exactly that. This free learner outcomes guide and survey template makes it easy to measure what matters. You'll get a ready-to-use form that tracks what happens after a credential is issued, from satisfaction to application to advancement. It's customizable, simple to send, and incredibly effective for capturing impact. And if you're an incredible customer, it's even easier. You can automate the whole thing using email campaigns. Just schedule it to go out 6 months post-credential and collect the results at scale. Because credentials aren't just about the moment that they're earned. They're really about what happens next. And that brings us to full circle. Because the moment of issuance isn't the end of the story. It's actually the starting point for impact, but only if your credentials are built to be used and not just earned. So here's the challenge we'll leave with you. What part of your credential program is invisible today? Is it to learners, to employers, or even to your own team? And what would it take to make it usable, visible, and valuable in the moments that matter most? Because when credentials are designed for performance, they don't just recognize achievement, they truly unlock opportunity. Thank you so much, and I hope this was helpful for everyone. And I think at this point, Laura and I will turn to take any questions.
Excellent. As Erica mentioned, we'd love to hear some of your questions. We'll get started with a question around benchmarks. So, Erica, do you have any benchmarks around engagement, around what good might look like for engagement with a credential?
Absolutely. So we actually have this embedded within our analytics platform, where not only can you track how many credentials are being opened, are being viewed, and being truly engaged with, but we give you metrics across other credible users so you can start to understand industry standards of what a good share rate can look like. Along those lines, when you work with our dedicated account managers, this is their job to strategize around your data, understand your North Stars, and figure out how to leverage the platform in a way to get you to those end goals, whether it's a higher share rate, a higher engagement rate, a higher renewal rate, whatever it is, we're there to sort of help strategically guide and assess how we can make the most impact for your programs.
Excellent. We have one more question here. We've got a couple more minutes to answer any other questions that might come up, so feel free to submit those in the Q&A. This next one is around encouraging students or credential recipients to use or share their credentials. What are some ways that we can get them to share them when they're looking for a job or trying to get a promotion?
Yeah, absolutely. And so much of digital credential issuance isn't just about the issuance itself. It's about education around the value of the credential for students. Just as an aside, I am an ex higher ed professor, and I always struggle to get students to be able to articulate their value. They understood what they did, but it just there was a real opacity around them sort of talking about their values and talking about the things and skills that they've learned to instructors, to employers, and to others in their ecosystem. So we have a couple of ways that we can sort of help galvanize this sort of understanding and education. The first is a feature I talked about previously. It's called email campaigns. And these are a very set it and forget it. We have targeted sort of ideas and structures. We have email templates ready to go, where you can essentially choose a goal of your email campaign, and it will reach only the appropriate audience at different steps and at different times. So everyone who is utilizing and acting on the information that you give them can fall out of that sort of correspondence. But those that you need to continue to sort of press and make sure that they're optimizing their credential use. This is a really hands-off way for you to be able to sort of identify those that might be bottlenecks somewhere and really start to have some strategic and targeted impact for them. And the other thing we really have too, and I think Laura may have a link for this, we can post it in the chat, is we have a guide to create a credential recipient landing page. And what this does is exactly what it sounds like. It's essentially educating your learners not only where to get their credential, what to do with it, and more importantly, why it matters to them. Because when they can start to see that sharing their credentials can directly impact their options for achieving, a job opportunity, that's really all the motivation they need to understand that this can be the source and the thing that sort of sets them apart from the pack and gets them that first opportunity and that foot in the door.
Awesome. I just shared the link to that guide if you're interested in creating your own learner-facing digital credential page that really lines out very specifically how a learner can both utilize and then share their credential. That's a great resource. I have a question from Kara, and it sounds like she's coming from a nonprofit. And what would you say to other nonprofit leaders that desire to introduce credential pathways for programs to utilize as a benefit, but funding is an issue? So, how can we package the benefit of pathways to certain stakeholders?
That's a really great question. And there's a lot of ways we can certainly tackle this. I can speak to how Junior Achievement approached this idea because, again, it is a federated national nonprofit that needed to sort of create a centralized governance system for over 100 affiliates, different states with different, goals, budgets, options, and hurdles, I guess you could say. So one way is to start to promote the credential itself, what it means, and we can start using HTMI trackers or any other ways to quantify the ROI of maybe this credential and this share could not only extend the visibility of your program, but we can start to show and show your funders and donors especially, look at the reach we're getting. We're, limiting our marketing budget, but we're also reaching more people and we're getting more traffic back to our website with this organic marketing where our learners become our strongest brand advocates. This is a way to really attract, funding and donors to a good cause of what you're promoting. And it's a way to really hopefully fill the talent pool that all your nonprofit work is doing to help those people hopefully connect to an opportunity on the other end. But I can't speak to what it means when you can start to leverage your learners as talking about their goals, achievements, and everything they're doing within your programs as a mean to target some more donors and get the money we all need to make it bigger and better. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're coming right up on time here, so I'm going to draw everyone's attention to the chat where I dropped the link to a couple of additional resources. One, Erica mentioned towards the end of the presentation, which is the guide to measuring learner outcomes that matter. It includes a downloadable survey template, and you can edit and get started on collecting that learner outcome data right away. So check that out. Ask to download the template and start surveying your learners pretty much immediately. You can also sign up for Certified Insights. It's our monthly newsletter that includes a lot of the topics that we covered today, including those real life examples that give us so much inspiration. And then finally, I did include a link to talk to our team, whether you're already using the platform or you feel interested in anything that you've seen here today. Please, I encourage you to schedule an introductory chat with a member of our team. Thank you to all of you for taking the time to be with us today. And thank you to Erica for sharing her
Oh,
time and expertise.
thank you, Laura. It was my pleasure.
Lastly, please keep an eye out for a link to the recording of this webinar. It will hit your inboxes in the next couple of days. Thanks again for dropping by, and I hope you all have a fantastic week.
Mhm.